How excited are you?
Yeah, there is really should only be one answer for that. But how excited are you, Patty, to be here with me on Extra Shot with Alicia Fernandez Miranda?
I'm so excited that this is like your second interview that you've done.
Second recorded, yeah. And you asked me, what's this podcast about? And I was like, I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit like the Seinfeld episodes where Jerry goes to pitch his TV show and he's like, it's a show about nothing.
Yeah, but see what happened to that show?
Exactly. But I'm just, as I said to you, I'm finding people I find interesting. And frankly, I think if I find you interesting, others will find you interesting. And I know people are going to find you interesting, Patty, because we are at a very exciting time in your career.
Yes, we are.
Your book, your baby, End Credits will be out on August 29th. Mm-hmm. This episode will probably air after that. So I expect you'll be a huge celebrity by that point, and I'll get tons and tons of viewers who just want to know about the deep inner details of your life.
Don't share too much.
I mean, but you share a lot. Judd Apatow called your book hilarious and brutally honest, which it is. And a really smart person said it was a compulsively readable, totally riveting, fly on the wall perspective on the cutthroat television industry that manages to be hilarious and heartfelt at the same time. That person was me, who I basically forced myself to blurb your book because I loved it so much when I read it.
Please. Thank you so much for doing that. I mean, that was an amazing blurb. I love it. I will be reading that whenever I feel insecure and sad about bad reviews.
What bad review? I actually printed my first blurb and I still have it on my wall, and my first Goodreads review, which was very nice. And I have subsequently read no reviews of my book whatsoever because I think
that's smart.
I don't need to know anybody else's opinion. It's already out there. I can't change it. So it doesn't really matter what they think. But I printed those too because I like to have them as a reminder. But like when you're an author, and you will have been through this, and anybody who's written a book will know this feeling, this awkward feeling of having to ask people to blurb your book because it feels...
It's the worst.
It is, right? Like it's so uncomfortable to ask for praise. And yet I just sent you a blurb. I was like, please, for the love of God, Patty, let me blurb this book because I loved it so much.
I mean, that's why I was so thankful, because it's like, I didn't even have to ask you, like that's great. That's like the best scenario. No, asking for blurbs is the worst. I mean, it's just so uncomfortable. I mean, you're basically saying to somebody, spend at least, a week if they're a fast reader, but probably more weeks of your time reading my book. And then if you don't like it, you have to lie and say that you like it.
Exactly. And you have to write something that's like short and probably going to be on my book cover or something like that.
So, right. That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, but I actually think that asking for blurbs might have been my least favorite part of the entire book writing, publishing, and promotional process.
Yeah,
I really hated it.
Same. What was your favorite though of everything?
Oh man,
I want to see if it's the same as mine.
Well, it was the promo. The promo, because I'm a real ham and I love people saying nice things about me. And so, but you haven't had that part yet of your book process. So you never know. It could come up. What has your favorite part been?
It's been recording the audiobook.
Oh, I did love doing that.
That was fantastic. That was so fun because you're there with your book and you're just in this little booth alone with your book and you're reading it from start to finish. I mean, obviously I've read my book a million times when I've, been editing it and stuff, but it's very rare that you read the whole thing from start to finich
and out loud where you're really paying attention.
Exactly. And that's when you really get this sense of, the cohesive nature of it. And I don't know, it just hits you in a different way when you're reading it out loud all at once. And, and I found myself getting very emotional about stuff that I had not felt that way about in a long time because I had looked at it so many times. It was really a magical experience for me.
I'm so glad you loved it. Now, you were concerned about what to eat and drink before and during your experience. I got several emails asking for dietary advice. So I'm guessing it all went okay. It sounds like it did.
Except for the day that I decided to go to McDonald's on the way in. This was my brilliant idea. Is I went to McDonald's. I went through the drive-through at McDonald's and I got a sausage McMuffin.
Oh God.
And the trick is you take the hash brown patty and you put it inside the sausage McMuffin.
Okay, so that sounds delicious.
It's so good. It's so good.
But then was your stomach making all kinds of noises?
I had so much gas. It was, my stomach noises were so loud that I had to clutch a pillow to my belly for the rest of the day.
Oh my God. I had a similar experience. So the audiobook guest starring Patty's McDonald's Breakfast is also going to be available on August 29th. Oh my gosh. So I want to talk about the book. You also are such an interesting person with so many fascinating hobbies. You've been an extra on many of my husband's favorite television shows, which I've been told can't talk about them because you've signed an NDA, but wink, wink. They all have star in the title. And you do a killer Radiohead karaoke, which we have had the experience of doing together. So there's like a lot of places we could go with this conversation, but I want to start at the beginning. So when you read my What If Year, you sent me the most beautiful email. It was one I've saved actually in my files. And you wrote in it, "You'll see when you read my book that you and I have a lot in common." And besides the fact that the closest I ever got to David Letterman was waiting in line for a ticket in high school in the studio audience and then like not being able to go because I was going to miss the curfew for our dinner at the Moonlight Diner or whatever the hell you do when you go visit New York in high school. You were 100% right. And I'm just always amazed how much of the immigrant parent mentality is so translatable across different cultures. My family is Cuban, your family is Taiwanese, and yet there were so many similarities. So take me back. Tell me a little bit about little Patty sitting up, eating Doritos, watching TV, and like thinking about her life. Tell me about your childhood.
Well, I grew up in Illinois. I was born and raised in Illinois up until I was 11, at which point we moved to New Jersey. But I really still feel like, the Midwest is kind of my hometown. And, we lived in a, typical suburban development. And my parents both worked. So my brother and I were latchkey kids, and we would just sit in front of the TV. Our babysitter was the TV. And we would just sit and watch TV for hours and hours and hours, and like reruns of the Monkees and the Brady Bunch. I mean, that was my childhood. And I never thought that I was going to end up working in TV because it just never occurred to me that people could do that, like obviously there's somebody who's creating these shows, but like it just, as a child in that environment, like it wasn't even a dream of mine. So yeah, I was just watching for pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
But obviously all that stuff, like, really seeped into my soul.
This is good. This is what I tell myself when I let my children watch so much TV. I'm like, they could be a brilliant writer one day. They'll understand story structure really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if they don't, they'll end up, being able to do like, I don't know, trivia games or something.
That's true. Actually, my son would be so amazing on a game show that he could win a lot of money that way. Maybe this is the direction I should be heading in with my parenting. Okay. But anyway, so you didn't know you wanted to be a TV writer.
No.
And yet you consumed a lot of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And then you decide you go to college.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't even know that I was going to be a writer. I mean, I started writing when I was very young, like third grade, and loved it. But again, had no kind of clue that this was something that you could do as a career.
Yeah.
And I think also that's part of that immigrant experience.
Totally.
It's like there were certain jobs that were available to us,
doctor, lawyer, business person.
Yep. There you go.
Business person encompassing all sins. That was pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, writer wasn't one of them. Artist wasn't one of them. I was very into art when I was growing up. I loved to draw and paint, and but that was a hobby. Like that was not something that I was really allowed to pursue. In fact, I didn't even think about pursuing it. I don't even remember having a conversation about that with my parents, because I just knew that it was not viable. So, so yeah, when I went to college, I majored in communications, thinking that I was going to go into advertising. That was my plan. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why that's funny, but I think
it's funny now that I know you a little bit and feel like I know you through your book. I just feel like you have a high bullshit detector.
Yeah.
I think we're allowed to curse on this podcast. It's my podcast, so let's do that. We'll put an E in the ratings for this one.
Okay.
And advertising is it's kind of all artifice, really.
Yes.
It's all about how you're selling something to somebody. And I'm not sure I could see you being good at it. I'm not sure you would love it though.
Well, this is actually a story that's not in my memoir. So I went to college for communications, but that was sort of like a vague concept. And, and they didn't really have like a lot of courses in advertising specifically. So I didn't really go down that path. Then I ended up doing an internship at the Letterman show when I was a freshman, and I immediately fell in love with entertainment and, wanted to do that as a career. But right before, like the year before my senior year of college, I thought, you know what? I need to try this advertising thing at least a little bit, just to see if that's, something that I want to pursue at all. So I did an internship at an ad agency the summer after my junior year of college.
Oh my God.
And it was terrible. It was so awful. I'm not going to say the name of the agency, but it was a very big name agency. And the minute I got there, it was like the culture of that workplace was so foreign to me, because I had come from entertainment where people were super chill, everybody was very casual. People wore jeans to work and t-shirts and, and then I got to this ad agency, and it was like, suddenly I had to wear pantyhose. Yeah, exactly.
Never do a job with pantyhose, ladies. Yeah, just saying.
Yeah, it was very odd, and the, just like the internship itself we didn't really have anything to do. I think that they didn't trust the interns to actually do anything. So I was just bored out of my mind. Like I would sit at my desk and I would like work on a novel. I would go take like, 3-hour lunches, and like, one time I went to a movie in the middle of the day.
Okay. You're actually making advertising sound great. So
no,
maybe just being an intern. The idea of getting paid for a job where you have zero responsibility sounds very appealing sometimes.
But it really wasn't, because I wanted to learn something.
Yeah, of course. You were at that early stage in your career. You were hungry.
Exactly. And I when I worked at the Letterman show as an intern, they had us we were so busy. Like they had us doing stuff all the time. And yeah, some of it was grunt work, running errands and getting people their lunch and stuff like that. But I would rather, as an intern, I would rather do that than just be sitting around, like having absolutely nothing to do and no one paying any attention to you, and and certainly nobody teaching you anything, So yeah, I mean, I remember going to like a baseball game in the middle of the day.
That is amazing. I did work an early job where I would catch up on a lot of back episodes of Lost and Battlestar Galactica in my little cubicle if I didn't have that much to do.
Wow.
But it was mostly it was a busy job, but it was also in a way like not so different from TV in that you would have very busy periods and then you'd have very slow periods. So during the slow periods, I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? I know this will be productive time. And actually this is a whole so I have to say there is a bit of there's a whole period of your life where you're writing in TV with one of the Lost showrunners, which was my first real like TV obsession. And I can't remember if I told you this already, but I was like in the message boards for Lost, like big time. I still get an annual email to my handle, Lost in Miami, which was my handle. And on my birthday every year, they still wish me a happy birthday because I was like in these message boards. I was so into these shows. But, you know, one of the things that's so amazing about your book is that TV is, it's certainly when I was growing up, and I think it's different now, but, you know, still to some extent, it's very immersive. It's such a part of the fabric of your life. And it seems like working in TV would be very glamorous, all fun and games. You've got these incredible shows. And yet, you know, one of the things that your book really does is takes us behind the scenes of the writer's room to show us it's not all that it seems when you're watching it on the other side of the screen. So what do you think people are going to find most surprising when they read your book?
I think maybe the fact that it's so chaotic, you know, just that there seems to be a certain randomness to the way things are done often, that it's hard to believe that a coherent show comes out of it. I mean, honestly, like I'm still surprised by it sometimes. And not everybody has this, you know, I'm just going to say that sort of have that blanket disclaimer, which is that not everybody in the TV business had the same experience as me. And I know that there are shows where things are much more organized and people have, you know, there's a procedure, you know, that where it's not as crazy, but my experience was just almost every single job that I had was just pure chaos. And I think that's probably the thing that will be most surprising. You know, it's like, how did this great show come out of a process where people are literally like, you know, doing it at the last minute, and like 10 different people are writing different like disembodied scenes of a show and then stitching them together. And like, you know, I mean, that is how so many of these shows are made.
That part was really crazy because you watch something and you know, you think there's like a voice, like a cohesive voice going through, but it's actually a bunch of different writers. And you talk about some instances where you're like, people are just literally throwing jokes out, like throwing jokes, and then it doesn't work. You're trying something else and you're trying something else. And of course, some of these things for shows you worked on have become iconic, you know, the types of things that people now, because of streaming, watch a cajillion times over and over. So it was like absolutely wild. As a person who has a particular fascination with jobs and how they work, I loved that part of the book. But I loved the family part and reconciling this career with your upbringing. And I have to tell you, you have a chapter called Lazy. I think Lazy is the title of the chapter, right? And it is about a period in your career where you take a step back to kind of take some time off and regroup. And you talk about this feeling of this sort of huge guilt around feeling you're lazy, hearing your parents' voice in your head, like, oh, you're being lazy because you're not working, you know, a kajillion miles a minute. You're not pushing yourself to the end of your limits. And I really think about that. I would say at least once a week, maybe twice a week. I think about that chapter of your book. I do. I think about it all the time. I feel like you articulated something that I also feel, which is this fear that I'm not working hard enough. You know, are you better at that now? This was, you know, many years ago that you were writing about this period. Do you feel like you are better at being lazy now?
That's such a great question. First of all, thank you so much for saying that. The fact that you still think about the book is
all the time.
It's the greatest compliment. I honestly, like, because it just means a lot to me. So thank you. yes, I am better at being lazy. I am way better. I mean, look, like after telling the story about going to a baseball game in the middle of the day, people are going to think, oh, she was lazy even as a college intern. But no,
I actually think you
no.
were very smart and creative using your time. So, but go on.
Yeah, trust me that nobody missed me at that thing. So I think that I have gotten way better at just being. You know, I mean, when I took that sabbatical in the middle of my career, that was very difficult to do because first of all, like you said, you know, the family sort of culture was like, you never take a break, you know,
Never
you
stop
should,
working. Yeah.
you should always be doing something. You should always be productive, you know, you should always have like a side gig or whatever it is, you know. And then the other thing was just, you know, like in TV, in the entertainment business, you know, you don't step away when things are going well for you, you know, because people are desperate for these jobs. So when, you know, you're constantly hustling. Right. And so it was a really big thing to say, no, I'm going to take this self-imposed hiatus from all of that. And I would just be constantly plagued by feelings of guilt. And, you know, I would see somebody working and I would just hate myself, you know, like, oh my God, that person is being so productive. And like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And it was really hard to enjoy myself when that was going on. But it, like anything that doesn't come naturally to you, you have to work at it. I mean, like that's the irony, right? Is that you have to work
at being lazy.
You have to work at learning
true.
learning how to rest and relax. But with practice, you know, you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to practice it. And you have to, I think the main thing is just like not letting myself listen to those like voices that say, the voices in my head that say you're being lazy, you're not being productive. And I'm not saying that I've got it all figured out, because I still struggle with it a lot. And it's funny because like there are certain like ways of being lazy that feel like they're acceptable because I'm getting something out of it. You know what I mean? Like there's like levels, right? Of laziness that are acceptable and less acceptable. So, but I think it's just a lifelong practice. And I do think that it's a really worthwhile practice because we all work too hard. We all push ourselves too hard. You know what I mean? And I really don't know anybody where I'm like, that person really should push themselves harder. You know?
It's so true. And I think in a creative, when you're writing a book, you know, you do need to get inspiration from, you need to live. Like when you're writing a memoir, you need to live a life. When you're writing a book, you need to live. And I remember going to see, when I was working on edits for my What If year, I just was like, I left and I went to go see West Side Story alone at like 1 PM in the middle of the day. And I felt extremely guilty buying the movie ticket. And then I was like, no, I am engaging with art, and therefore I will be better at creating art. But like, if I didn't have that, like I couldn't just go to the movie in the middle of the day because I felt like it. I was like, no, this needs to have a purpose. But I really struggle with it. And I hear you. I think the guilt is very real. And the voice in my head is my dad's voice for sure. It's like not my inner voice. It's definitely my dad's voice that's saying that to me. Like, what are you working on today?
No, I mean, like there are certain things like I'll allow myself to do if I'm listening to a podcast and learning something at the same time, you know, and I have to really be aware of that, you know, because it is perfectly fine to go, I don't know, prune a plant and not be listening to a podcast, you know, at the same time, or like just be in silence or listen to music that I like, or, you know, whatever. Like, it's a constant practice to let go of the standards of productivity. And I do think that for an artist, it is so important to be able to let go of that productivity. You know, like as a TV writer, I felt completely bled dry. You know, the burnout it's not just the hours that you're spending in the job. And, you know, the burnout is it's a creative burnout where you are just being treated like a machine. And that is not how art works. You know, like you need, as an artist, you need time to reflect. You need time to just be. And, you know, and I've had experiences where I'll do like a retreat or something where I'm just like, you know, unplugging from everything. And as soon as things really get quiet, I suddenly have this burst of creativity and like all of these ideas come in. Not that that should be a goal, but I'm just saying that, you know, that's what happens a lot of times when you do, you know, stop being so busy.
Yeah, there's room for other things to flourish. I love that. Now, how did you make sure that the process of writing your memoir and turning end credits into a cohesive book was not going to burn you out? Like, how did you keep that creative spark when you were putting the book together and make sure you didn't like overwhelm yourself?
Oh, well, it took me 12 years to write it. I mean, honestly, like it, you know, I hear people talk about like that they wrote a book in a year, and I'm like, how? I don't understand that, you know. I mean, if you really did treat it like a full-time job and that's all you did, then yeah, of course you could get the words on the page. But for me, it was like I didn't want to I didn't want to turn it into a goal that was going to stress me out. And so I had to really just take my time with it. And part of the reason why it took me so long to finish the book was that there were long stretches of time where I wasn't working on it. You know, like I would just get into other projects. I would sew, or I would go to Burning Man, or, you know, whatever. And I just let it be okay that I wasn't working on it. And I knew that I would eventually get back to it. So I think the answer to the question is you have to just, you know, let it unfold organically, and, you know, and just take, you know, I think for me, you know, my goal wasn't just to finish a book. You know, my goal was to grow as a creative person just in general. And so sometimes that means working on the book, and sometimes that means making a dress, you know, it means following the inspiration wherever that takes me, you know. And like, even now, sometimes I'm like, you know, I'll get an idea for like a costume I want to make. And then I'll be like, oh, but I got to do these other things. And, you know, and then I'll talk to my therapist about it. And she's like, you need to make that costume.
Yeah.
You know, like she'll encourage me because she knows that that is something that is going to feed my creativity and make me happy.
I just think you live this like, so anybody who follows you on Instagram sees so many of your creations. So, okay. So I know you sew. I can see a sewing machine behind you. I've seen these amazing boxers that you've made with your husband, usually as the model. I see. Yes. So that's an enjoyable part of your Instagram. Thanks for that. But also you make these amazing costumes. You bake at least once a year, you said, right?
Yes. At Christmas, I'll make like a gingerbread. Yeah.
It's like one baking activity. Yeah. You are an extra sometimes on shows. And you do these really like elaborate costumes for, I mean, and you really dress up and you look amazing. So did I like name all your hobbies, or is that not anywhere near the total list of them?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
I mean, that I can think of, you know, I mean, I love to cook just in general. I mean, the baking only happens like infrequently, but I cook all the time. I mean, I cook like, you know, 3-4 nights a week at least.
Oh, that's good.
And I like to cook. And what else?
Well, there's your karaoke.
That I do not do enough.
Why, Patty? You're so good. And it was so fun.
No, I mean, you blew me out of the water when you did your share. Oh my God.
I have some
You had
acapella experience. I'm like a ringer when you come
uh
into karaoke. I'm like, oh, I'm just here doing it for the fun. Give me a C flat. No.
no, it was amazing. You had the whole place like in the palm of your hand.
Well, we had this amazing time. And so I cannot let you go on this podcast before hearing what are your top go-to karaoke songs for, I mean, it could be a variety of moments, but you're sitting there, the book is in front of you. What pages are you flipping to? I would like maybe a top 5, but if 5 is too many, I'll take a top 3.
Okay, well, Creep by Radiohead. That's the one that I did with you. I just love that song. It's not really in my range, but when you get to when I get to the part where it gets sort of in the higher range, the falsetto, like that part I can pretty much nail. But I just love that slow build that song has, and just any song where you get to a point where you can belt it and just like close your eyes and like let it rip. Like that's
the greatness of karaoke.
Right? Yeah. So that's probably my number one.
Yeah.
I actually haven't done this in public, but I've done it at home a million times. And this is one of my, dreams, is to do Xanadu.
Oh,
yeah. And I couldn't find it when we went to that bar in Santa Monica. I couldn't find it in the book. So, but eventually, I'll find a bar that has it and I'll do it. But that's another one that's not in my range because Olivia Newton-John had a high voice.
She did have a very, very high voice. And she could belt high as well.
Unbelievable singer. I mean, normally I'm not really into sopranos, but her voice was just perfect. It was angelic,
Yeah.
I just love that song. It was written by ELO. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. ELO actually did the whole soundtrack to Xanadu.
Oh my God. Fun fact.
It's the only reason that movie is even barely watchable. But that song is fantastic. So that's my dream, to do that one.
And when you say you do it at home, do you sing alone? Or are you singing at like home karaoke parties? Because I sing karaoke alone at home a lot.
I mean alone.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I knew I had a kindred spirit in that way.
Yeah. During the pandemic, I did a lot of singing at home. Actually my husband plays the bass very infrequently, but he has a very nice bass guitar. And so, sometimes he would like play the bass and I would sing, and we would have our own little like family band.
Oh my God. It's like the dream. I'm trying to get my kids to play a range of musical instruments that involve them being backing artists for me in some kind of band.
Yes.
And as you can see, I bought this podcast mic here, which doubles as my home karaoke mic because it's like a handheld microphone, which is my favorite kind. Okay, but I digress. All right. We have Creep, we have Xanadu.
Yeah.
What else? What's on the Patty hit list?
I love Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain and Tennille.
Uh-huh.
I can see that you're not that into that one.
I am just really excited to go sing karaoke again, is what's happening here.
And then I would say that sort of the dark horse, this is one that is very hard to find in karaoke bars because it's not a popular song. It's a Beatles song, but it's not one of their popular ones, and it's called "Oh Darling."
Oh, I don't know that song.
Oh, it's on Abbey Road, which is my favorite Beatles album. I'm a huge Beatles fan, and that's my favorite album. And "Oh Darling" is a song that was written and sung by Paul McCartney, but it sounds like a John Lennon song. Like that's kind of the beauty of it, is that it's got kind of like both of their personalities even in it, even though it was a Paul McCartney song. It's just one of those songs where he just belts it the whole time, just like very bluesy, so that one, and that is completely in my range. So
it's a perfect song. I'm going to immediately listen to it after we hang up.
Okay, I could kill that in karaoke, but it's never on the list.
It will be when we go. I don't know how I'm going to find it, but I will. I went to Liverpool for the first time, actually, for the Eurovision Song Contest in May, which is
really?
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother. That's a podcast episode in and of itself. And we stayed in the only hotel room we could get, which was above the Beatles Experience. So they just played, like it was like 8 days a week, Hard Day's Night, and there may be Yellow Submarine, but just on repeat 24 hours a day at our hotel room.
Oh my God.
But actually it was amazing. I highly recommend Liverpool as a pilgrimage for Beatles fans.
Fantastic.
It's like the place.
I went there in 2003 and the whole time I was there, I just had this huge grin on my face. You know, I went on the tour that stops at all of the Beatles childhood homes. Did you do that?
No, we were only there for 24 hours and we were really there for Eurovision. That was the focus of our trip. So.
You just went to watch the Eurovision thing?
Yeah, it was being held in Liverpool. So we got tickets to the dress rehearsal for the final. It's a real subculture over here. I actually feel like you would love Eurovision. Is that on your radar?
I've never seen it.
Okay, well, some things are going to happen. So after this podcast is done, we are obviously going to sing karaoke together, and we're gonna need Eurovision is costumes and music and camp, and it's just everything wonderful about the world. I really love it so much. I'm now thinking I need to get someone from Eurovision on this podcast because that's gonna be okay. This is happening at a later date. Patty, do you have a number 5 go-to karaoke song before we wrap up this conversation? Because you gave me 4 amazing ones.
I mean, there was a time where I was singing Queen songs constantly on karaoke because we actually had this thing called SingStar on our, I think it was on Sony PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is that they show the real videos, the real music videos, along with the lyrics. So instead of watching some cheesy, reenactment, they show the real video. And so I had the starter kit was like all Queen songs, and I love Queen. So I would do, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. I would do Under Pressure. I love doing Under Pressure, but that's really, you need a partner for that.
Yeah, that's a good. So perhaps that's what we'll do together, Patty, next time we are in person.
Please.
I would happily be Bowie. I don't know. I'd be either.
Because you need a high voice to do. Actually, either of them.
Maybe we'll just take the key down a little bit, or it doesn't matter because it's going to be karaoke. Well, Patty, I cannot wait for this day to come where we are karaokeing again. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I had the best time with you.
Thank you so much.
And everybody get end credits out now. I think by the time you hear this, it is such an amazing book. I cannot speak more highly of it. I loved it just so much.
Thank you so much. And everybody buy Alicia's book because that's fantastic too.
Do that too.